Right, today in video 2 we're going to talk about sources of fresh water, and we're going to start by looking at surface water, which would be our rivers and lakes and streams and creeks. And we're going to think about this concept of watersheds and river basins first and see what the difference is. The primary river in our area is the Neuse. The Neuse is not the only river. There's the Eno, there's the Flat, there's the White, and they are all tributaries of the Neuse. And then we've got many creeks, Crabtree Creek, Swift Creek, and they all run into the Neuse as well. So all of these bodies of water and all of the land that drains every time we have rain into these smaller streams, these medium-sized rivers, and then the large rivers, all of those describe watersheds and river basins. River basins are the larger. They're the ones that encompass the big river that the smaller rivers, the tributaries, the creeks, the streams end up flowing into. So the river basin is described as the area that drains into the large river. So in our case, that would be the Neuse. And then the watersheds would be smaller. So you've got the Crabtree Creek watershed, because Crabtree Creek is a rather significant creek. You've got the Eno River in Durham watershed. And these watersheds eventually flow into the Neuse River Basin. And we're going to do we'll do a demonstration of this at the end of the notes, and we're also going to look at 7 different river basins around the world and some of their issues and bodies of waters they drain into them and that they drain into. And we're also then going to do a lab tomorrow where you're going to look at one of the river basins in North Carolina and actually explore all of its tributaries and all of the land and the different elevation and human impact on that. So remember from our notes last week that 97% of all the water on the earth is ocean water, only 3% is fresh. 70% of that fresh water is frozen, 29% is underground in the aquifers, and just that remaining small percentage is lakes, rivers, and streams. You can think of a watershed and a river basin like a giant funnel. Where the water is, where the creek bed is, where the river bed is, the land is moving down. And so as all the water runs down, where does it end up? So tributaries just means smaller body of water. That can be a stream, it can be a creek, it can actually be another river that acts as a tributary. But it's all flowing downhill. In the case of most of the river basins in North Carolina, they end up in a larger body of water like the Atlantic Ocean. We do have some in the western part of the state that flow on the western side of the mountains, and they end up flowing into larger rivers that end up flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. So our large river basins are made of many interconnected watersheds. For example, like I gave you before, Crabtree Creek, Swift Creek, the Eno River, the Flat River. Those are all different, smaller watersheds within our larger river basin. And again, a tributary is just a smaller river or creek that dumps to the larger river. And water in a watershed is always going to the point of lowest elevation. And that's going to be your stream bed, your river bed, your lake bed, or eventually at the mouth of the river into the ocean. So a river is defined as a long channel in which water is moving continually. There is a slope. Some riverbeds have a very steep slope, those in the mountains, and then like those here where we are, the Neuse, it's more of a gradual slope because we have some raised elevation, like Apex is the highest point in Raleigh, but there's not a river running through Apex, just some creeks. And the Neuse from North Raleigh and Durham flows down, but the elevation is very slight, very small slope. A stream is just defined as a smaller channel. Again, it's going to flow down a slope, and its gullies is just a term for a smaller channel. And these tributaries are dumping into a larger river. A lake is defined as just a body of water that's of enough size, a pond would be smaller, that water collects in this basin or this bowl over time. Most lakes have streams that flow in or out, or rivers that flow in or out and feed it. Some lakes are contained and don't have creeks and rivers. Some lakes are fed by underground bodies of water coming up from the groundwater, underground springs. This is an example of, we've got the Neuse River Basin in the picture, and then the Swift Creek watershed is on top, and that's out in East Raleigh as you're coming into Garner, was where that picture was taken. And that is your ecological address. The river basin that you live in is what is referred to as your ecological address. Now, here we are. The Neuse and the Cape Fear are two of the largest river basins. They are all totally contained in our state, as is the Tar Pamlico. Other river basins in our state, either the river flows up into Virginia or down into South Carolina or over into Tennessee or even into Georgia, depending on where you are. So you can see the Cape Fear is the largest. The Neuse flows from right above Falls Lake. The Eno and the Flat River join together to make the Neuse right above Falls Lake, and it flows down to the mouth down near New Bern, where the Neuse mixes with the Pamlico Sound, dumps into the Pamlico Sound, and then the Pamlico Sound mixes with the ocean water at the inlets between the islands. North Carolina has 17 river basins. North Carolina has fall lines where the elevation changes, and that separates the coastal plain from the Piedmont, which is hillier, and the mountainous area. So you can see the yellow lines on my map represent the fall lines. You can see that Wake County the fall line goes through Wake County, so the northern part of the county, the northwestern part of the county, is a little bit higher elevation than the lower part, but we are still considered Piedmont. And my lines are straight. The fall line's actually not that perfect. You can see the difference between the yellow and the orange and the purple. So it does fall more along the differentiations in the coastal plain, the Piedmont, and the mountains. All right, then we have groundwater. That's all the water that is trapped underground. It is found in cracks and pores between sand and gravel and rocks. When rain falls, water does not stop moving. Some of it runs off into nearby bodies of water. Some of it is used by the plants. Some of it evaporates and returns to the atmosphere. And some of it seeps underground into the pores between sand and clay and rock formations. And these are called aquifers. And water moves through aquifers much like a glass of water poured on a pile of sand. It'll pull up, and then eventually it will trickle down and get trapped. Many communities get their groundwater from aquifers. Water suppliers would drill a well through the soil and the rock. They may have to go down hundreds of feet, even thousands of feet to get to the aquifer, and you may have a community well. A lot of neighborhoods in North Raleigh have community wells where a neighborhood has gone together and drilled for a large well. Other homes have private wells. Unfortunately, groundwater gets contaminated by human activity, and we will do a series of labs in the coming weeks to explain this and examine this issue. And when chemicals enter soil and rock, they pollute the aquifer. That ends up polluting your well and your drinking water. With city water coming from Falls Lake, the city of Raleigh is responsible for checking its water quality every day before they pump it to your house. However, if you have well water, you are responsible for checking it, and so it doesn't get checked as often. And there have been many incidents where people got sick from contaminated well water. They didn't contaminate their well, but somebody uphill did, because even underground, water is going to flow downhill. Groundwater moves very slowly. Again, gravity plays an effect. It's going to move downhill. And then third place we have water located is our wetlands. And that's where the water table is at, near, or above the land surface, long enough to support adapted plant growth. So the water table is when the aquifer is very close to the surface and there's a pool of water that is barely underground. And when the closer it is to the surface, and you've got plants that can have wet feet or their roots can be literally sitting in water all year long, then you have a wetland. Hydric plant, hydric soil. Hydric means it is wet. So you have plant matter that lives there that really likes to be wet. You have a lot of usually hydric soil is very nutrient rich. It's full of bacteria because plant matter decays much quicker in wet soil than it does in dry soil. And so you have a lot of bacteria activity, which can be good for growing these hydric plants as well. It can act as fertilizer. They also are great natural filters. Because hydric soil is so nutrient rich, they're some of the most diverse ecosystems on the earth. They have the greatest variety of plant life, and then they have the greatest variety of animal life and other organisms that live there because of so much plant life. So the food chain is very diverse there. They are our natural filters as they're part of the water cycle in the sense that they help clean water. They act like sponges and trap things that do not belong in the water. Now, there are different types of wetlands. We have swamps, bogs, and marshes, and basically the plant type, dominant plant there is what determines what the wetland is called. If it has dominated by trees, it's called a swamp. So the Great Dismal Swamp has many like bald cypress trees, which have those little knobby knees that grow out of the water. Their roots are actually appear to be above the surface instead of below. You have bogs, which is dominated by a type of moss called peat, and the North Carolina mountains have a lot of bogs. And then marshes, all along our coastline, we have salt marshes. They're dominated by grasses. And so here's a picture of a wetland. You can see that groundwater can feed the wetland. You can see streams feed into the wetland, streams feed out of the wetland. You've got a lot of different here. This has grasses growing in it. The soil is saturated. You've got a lot of bacteria action, and the bacteria action is fertilizer for the plants, but it also helps break down anything that is contaminated that comes into the wetland. And that's where we're going to stop today.